Am I the a-hole for punishing my foster daughter for telling the authorities my 12-year-old daughter was taking drugs? I, 34 female, have been looking after my foster daughter, Mary, 13 female, for over a year, ever since her parents overdosed on drugs. I also have a biological daughter, Lila, 12 female. Mary and Lila mostly get along, although there have been some minor arguments. A few weeks ago, the police came to Lila's school. Someone had sent an anonymous message to the school saying that Lila was in possession of drugs. After searching through her phone, locker, and bags, they realized that the drugs in question were Skittles that Lila had accidentally left in her bag, ripping open the packaging. Lila was terrified of the police and was traumatized by the incident. She's a very shy, quiet girl who had a panic attack at the thought of being sent to prison. While they wouldn't reveal who reported her, Lila suspected that it was Mary since she was the only one who could have seen the Skittles in her bag. Mary denied this at first, but eventually she snapped under pressure and admitted it. She said she made a mistake and was scared that Lila would overdose like her parents. I know that Mary has trauma related to drugs, but that's not an excuse. I've made it very clear that she can come talk to me about anything, even if it involves Lila. And yet she went to the school instead of telling me first. Mary said that she only went to the school in case I was biased towards Lila. She knew full well the legal ramifications of her actions. Both of them could have potentially been removed from my care. I can't help but think her intentions are malicious. Skittles look absolutely nothing like drugs. She didn't even talk to me or Lila about it. She just went straight to the authorities. So I decided to ground her, stop her allowance, increase her chores, and take away her electronics for the entire summer. She's still upset with me for this, saying I went too far and that I was punishing her for having trauma and trying to do the right thing. But I feel like I have a duty to teach her that it's not okay to potentially get our entire family into legal trouble over a misunderstanding. Am I the a-hole? Edit. The reason I thought she had malicious intentions was that the week before, Mary, coincidentally, started a large argument with Lila for hanging out with Mary's crush. Lila eats candy all the time, especially Skittles, and Mary knows that Skittles are her favorite. Am I the a-hole for moving out alone and not with my stepsister and lying about where I'm going to college? My dad and stepmom were both widowed when my stepsister, 18 female, and I, 18 female, were 5. They met a year later and became widowed parent friends. I always believed they started dating about a year after my mom and stepsister's dad died, but they don't want to admit they moved on so quickly, especially with kids involved. We would all hang out together during the day and have late nights at each other's houses for a couple of years. Even back then, I struggled to get along with my stepsister. She was always a sensitive kid, shy, quiet, and very delicate to any negativity or correction. I'm quiet and introverted, so we were similar. But I was supposed to be her best friend, as my dad said. I was meant to be gentle with her, help her, and make her laugh. It was annoying, and when my dad and stepmom admitted they were dating, I really hated being stuck with her. She clung to me at school, tracking me down and following me around. My dad told me I should love having a sister my age. I told him I didn't. He said I should think about how great it could be. I told him I wanted to spend time with friends without her. He said she was my best friend. She never made her own friends. She's very hard to get close to, hardly talks, and when she does, it's painful. She never wants to do anything and just follows me around. If I left to spend time with friends, she'd cry, and I'd get in trouble for leaving her. Then our half-siblings were born, and it was a mess. I love my half-siblings, and it was clear I loved them, but not my stepsister. My stepmom made a big deal about it and told me I shouldn't love some siblings more than others. I should love everyone. She also accused me of turning my half-siblings against my stepsister, but she never wanted to play with them or talk to them. Yet she would get upset when they saw they favored me. Mostly she hated that I favored them over her. I never wanted to spend time with her and had to be forced to, which showed. Family therapy was quit after 4 months. Because my dad and stepmom didn't like that so much focus was put on helping my stepsister branch out instead of helping us come together as sisters. For 2 years, my dad, stepmom, and stepsister planned for us to go to college together, move out together, travel at the same time, and settle in together. I made plans behind their backs with my grandpa and, against their wishes, moved out in June to live with him for the summer. I'll be starting community college in this town when school starts. My dad finally found out, and he and my stepmom are furious that I moved out without my stepsister, and that we won't be in the same school. Dad is also angry that I lied to him for 2 years. I told him he left me with no choice. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for telling my mom to shut up and accept that my wife and I aren't naming our kids the way she and dad named me and my siblings? My wife and I, both late 20s, had our first child together in June. Before he was born, there was a lot of talk about names from different family members on both sides, but the pressure to reveal the name was particularly on my side. We didn't tell anyone what the name would be until our son was born, and we had left the hospital. My parents were disappointed when we announced our son's name. My family is very traditional about names. We were each named after grandparents, and they believe everyone should follow this tradition. My wife's family, on the other hand, doesn't have a specific naming tradition. They simply choose names without much fuss. However, they tend to favor more uncommon and unusual names. My wife's and my tastes lean more towards her family's style rather than mine, which is why we chose the name Hollis for our son. My parents were not pleased because they had expected us to name him either Jack, after my dad, or Parker, after my father-in-law. They were particularly disappointed because they had been anticipating a little Jack. They questioned our decision to break tradition, and I explained that it wasn't a tradition on my wife's side either, so we decided not to follow one. In the past few months, both sides of our families have questioned our choice and suggested other names for future children. My mom has been the worst. She asked why we chose a name so different from the ones in our family. I told her that we didn't consider only our family's tastes but went with what we liked. She pointed out that our tastes were similar to my in-laws, and I agreed but emphasized that it was about our taste, not theirs. I told her I was done discussing it and have since changed the topic or ended the conversation when she brings it up or refuses to let it go. During a naming ceremony on Saturday, my mom insisted on criticizing the name, saying it was stupid and she hated it. She demanded that we change it to Jack or Parker. She claimed we had no right to break a long-held family tradition and suggested that the traditions were meant to prevent poor naming choices. She also insulted my in-laws, implying they must be pleased with their stupidly named grandkids. I lost my temper and told her to shut up and accept that we were not naming our kids like she and Dad named us. I told her she needed to leave and learn to be more respectful because I wouldn't tolerate insults against my wife or her family. My mom was furious at being told to shut up and said I had no excuse for being rude. I thought her behavior was unreasonable given her insults. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for losing my shit over cookies when my daughter-in-law tossed them out? I am a good baker. I enjoy making sweet treats for everyone to enjoy. My daughter-in-law, Emily, is very health conscious, especially now that they have 2 kids. She avoids sugars, mostly eats organic, and steers clear of processed foods. When the grandkids visit, I usually make cookies or something sweet for them to enjoy. Every single time she sees them, she goes on about how unhealthy they are. We had an argument a few months ago about not giving the kids junk. I pointed out that everything is homemade and that I am not only serving them cookies. My son stepped in, and we compromised that the kids can have 1 cookie when they are here. This arrangement worked for a while until yesterday. The kids came over last night, and I made a batch of cookies. They were cooling on the rack. Emily and my son decided to chat a bit before heading out. During that time, Emily went into the kitchen and threw away the cookies. When I asked her why she did it, she claimed she was doing me a favor since the cookies were unhealthy. I yelled at her, saying she had no right to throw away food I had worked hard to make. She got defensive and said she was just trying to help. My son stepped in and told me to calm down, but I was furious. Emily left the room in tears, and now my son is saying I overreacted and should apologize. I told my son that I will not be babysitting until he handles the situation and that I will not apologize. Am I the a-hole for going out to eat without my husband and kids because they didn't wash the dishes? Both my husband and I work full-time. I work in real estate and he works at a shipyard. We both work around 50 to 60 hours a week. We have 4 kids, 13-year-old twins, a 12-year-old, and an 8-month-old. My husband has every weekend off, while I do not. I implemented a chore system when the kids were little, but since having the baby and as the kids have grown older, they and my husband have slacked off significantly. I pick our baby up from daycare around 5 p.m., and when I get home, I usually find my husband on the couch on his phone and the kids in their rooms playing video games or watching makeup tutorials. The house is generally a mess, but the only issue I have is with the dishes. I don't care about the rest of the house because it's not dirty, just cluttered. I have expressed several times that I am tired of having to wash all the dishes before I can cook, and I've lashed out in not-so-nice ways, shutting off the internet entirely, taking the cord with me to work, canceling family trips, grounding the kids, and arguing with my husband. Things would change for a week to a month, but then everything would go back to them refusing to help. I'm honestly so tired of it that I don't have the energy to speak up anymore. As I mentioned, my husband and kids were home yesterday while I worked. Before I left for the day, I told them that the chores had better be completed by the time I got home. They said, "Yes, ma'am," and I left. I texted my husband around 4:30 p.m. asking what they wanted for dinner because I had to stop by the grocery store. I picked up what he said they all wanted, and when I got home, I found that not a single dish had been washed, and there were at least 10 more dishes in the sink from when I left that morning. Only a load of laundry had been washed and was still sitting in the washer, not switched to the dryer. My husband was on the couch watching YouTube, the kids were playing video games, and the baby was in her walker. I put the groceries on the table, packed a bag for the baby, and told my husband, "Have at it, I'm going to Applebee's," and left. About 20 minutes later, he called and said he washed the dishes but was super tired. I told him that was no excuse at all. There are 3 older kids who have chores, and he couldn't even step up and tell them to complete anything. It's pure laziness at this point. He said he was sorry, trying to work on it, and asked if I could come home because he didn't know how to make the dish we were having. I told him no. I was sitting at Applebee's enjoying my steak and shrimp with the baby in peace. I said he and the kids could fend for themselves because I wasn't letting him off the hook. He had me on speakerphone, So all the kids started asking me to please grab something from Applebee's because it's their favorite restaurant. I said absolutely not, and hung up the phone. When I returned home, the groceries had been put away, and they had grilled cheese and cereal for dinner. My husband and kids are still upset with me. I told them this is how it will be every single time they don't do their chores from now on. Am I the asshole for punishing my son after he said something racist? I, 39 female, about a week ago, my family ordered Chinese food for delivery. When the delivery driver arrived, my daughter, 16 female, was taking the cat upstairs to put him in her room because he always tries to eat the food. My son, 13 male, loudly said, "Make sure to hide the cat from the Chinese guy," as I was at the door getting the food from the Chinese delivery driver. The driver very obviously heard what my son said and was clearly upset. I quickly apologized and took the food. Later, I told my son that racist jokes were completely unacceptable and very wrong, but he refused to admit that he was in the wrong. That night, I made him write a sincere apology to the delivery driver. His name was on the receipt, as well as a one-page paper on Chinese culture and a one-page paper on why racism is perpetuated by racist jokes and stereotypes. The next day, I took him to the restaurant and had him read his apology aloud to the delivery driver and give him the papers he had written. The driver was very appreciative of the apology and thanked me for making my son do it. He then shared with my son multiple instances where he had faced racist comments and attacks while working as a delivery driver. That night, my husband, 43 male, and I got into an argument about this. He said that it was embarrassing for our son to have to make the apology and that the punishment didn't fit the crime. I told him that it was much more embarrassing for the driver to face racism and stereotypes, and that our son would get over the embarrassment. I do not condone any form of hateful thinking in our house, and my son's comment embarrassed me as well. My husband argued that it was just a joke and not a big deal. I feel like I might have overreacted, but I think it's important for my son to understand why what he said was wrong and hurtful. Am I the asshole for this punishment? Am I the asshole for pretending to get fired when customers get a temper with me? I am a high school student with a weekend job at a coffee shop. My coworkers who work weekends are James, the owner's son. He goes to my school. He's a shift manager, but it's not a formal position. He's a friendly guy. Danielle, a college student who sometimes works weekends too. Sometimes customers come in and get really angry about trivial things, like how we don't make the coffee hot enough. It can be a lot to deal with, especially when it seems like they're just looking for someone to take their bad mood out on. So, James and I were joking about having a little fun with these customers to hopefully get them off our backs. One day, a guy was upset because he thought we didn't make the coffee hot enough, even though I served it right out of the machine. James came over and asked, "Sir, is there a problem here?" The guy started ranting at him too. James then said, "This is unacceptable. You're fired." I began acting really upset, saying, "No, please don't fire me. My family needs the money. I need this job, please." James played along, acting like a tough boss, telling me to take off my apron and leave. The angry guy started to backtrack, saying, "It isn't that big of a problem. You don't need to fire her over it. I didn't mean it." James replied, "No, we pride ourselves on the best customer service." Of course, after all that drama, I still had my job. It was just a prank. We've done this a few times now. Whenever a customer loses their temper with Danielle or me, James will fire us. Almost every time, the angry customer will apologize and say they didn't mean it. It's kind of satisfying, making people realize their actions might actually have consequences. I was telling my friends from school about this, and a few of them thought it was a mean prank, making someone leave thinking they got someone who desperately needs the money fired. Am I the asshole for this joke? Am I the asshole for coming to dinner basically topless? I have dreaded posting for a while because I am afraid I might be the asshole, but I just have to know. So here goes. My parents-in-law and brother-in-law came to visit and stay for a month with my husband, 27 male, and me, 28 female, after I had my baby. For context, if it makes any difference, I am German, and my husband and his family are Italian. The baby was 3 months old at the time, and I breastfeed her. Usually, I would just nurse on the couch in the living room, but because company was staying, I would go to my bedroom. After I nursed her, she would fall asleep and take a nap, and I would have some free time. Since family was visiting, I tried to plan her naps around our mealtime to spend time with the family uninterrupted. My mother-in-law has this thing where when food is on the table, you have to be there immediately. Sometimes I would be late coming to a meal because babies can be unpredictable, and she would not fall asleep right away or would nurse longer than usual. To this, my mother-in-law would barge into my room and announce that food was ready, all impatient. This startled the baby and made the process last much longer than it should have. As a result, I had to eat much later than everyone else, alone, and the food was cold. It left me fuming. More work with the baby and being secluded. This happened several times. I asked my husband to talk to her and explain that I cannot always come on time. He talked to her, but she still did this anyway, so I decided to stop being late to the dinners. The next time she barged into my room and announced that food was ready, I came without hesitation. I came to the table exactly as I was. No shirt, half a bra, and the baby hanging on one breast. Nothing was seen as the baby's head covered up everything anyway, but still. This caused an uproar. It went something like this. My mother-in-law exclaimed what I was doing at the table like this. I was indecent. There were men at the table. I should be ashamed. I yelled back, asking what she kept calling me to the table for if I was not yet ready. I had no reason to be in my room alone with my baby while everyone else was out having a great time together. My brother-in-law and father-in-law were trying not to get involved in the argument. My husband ushered me back to my room and scolded me, taking his mother's side. He said he understood that I was frustrated, but this action did not help anything. But after that, my mother-in-law did not bother me again while I was busy with the baby. So what if I came to some meals a little after everyone had started eating? The roof did not cave in. Anyways, everyone lived happily ever after. The end. Am I the asshole? Am I the a-hole for outshining the bride? So I, 27 female, am a Black African woman. I'm living and working in Germany on a fixed-term secondment. While here, I became quite friendly with a colleague, 60 female, who invited me to her daughter's wedding. I was excited as I'd never been to a white wedding. I asked if there was a dress code or color scheme to adhere to since it wasn't specified on the invite. I was told the code was dress to impress, bet. On the day of the wedding, I understood the assignment. I wore my traditional attire, which is really beautiful and obviously not German. The garment is green, so I thought there would be no problem. Or so I thought. I received a lot of questions and compliments at the wedding, which I genuinely downplayed because it wasn't my day. My colleague seemed colder than usual, but I paid it no mind since she was the mother of the bride and could be preoccupied. The bride was downright rude to me, but again, I gave her grace. I congratulated her and thanked her for including me, and I received a tight, expressionless response. I kept to the edges of the room as the music wasn't really my vibe, and I was just observing how European weddings work. I left around 8 p.m. after 5 hours, and went home before the wedding finished. On Monday, I walked into whispers in the office, and people were strangely more reserved than usual. An office friend pulled me aside and filled me in. The bride's mother is fuming. My outfit was deemed too extravagant, OTT, and inappropriate. I drew attention away from the bride and commandeered the room. I was accused of being rude and disrespectful. She has apparently told people all about it. I approached the mother of the bride and asked to speak, but she said she had nothing to say to me. I asked why she had something to say about me to everyone else, but not to me, and she called me an insolent child. I explained to anyone who scolded me that this was my first white wedding. I specifically asked what to wear and followed the guidelines. Where I'm from, there's no such thing as outshining the bride. Weddings are a fashion show and a chance to wear your best and brightest clothes. I was told this isn't Africa, which felt racially coded, and that people here have manners. I laughed and told that person to go to hell, so now they're saying I lack remorse for my behavior. I'm wondering if I really am the asshole, though. Am I the asshole for letting you know I am divorcing you by sending you a thread on the website that you used to ignore me? Hi, Stefan. Maybe you will finally listen. And if you are wondering if you can just speed home and stop me from doing this and leaving, it is too late. I am sending you this after I have already loaded everything in the car and left. Do not worry. I spoke with our landlords and took my name off the lease. I have set up a direct deposit for the next month's rent. After that, you are on your own, buddy. I guess you are wondering why. I am guessing you will act like you are completely blindsided, right? Because you have done absolutely nothing wrong and you are a great husband and father-to-be, aren't you? Well, buddy, let me break it down for you in a language you understand. I, 29 female, have been married to my husband, 35 male, for 5 years, and we have been together for nearly 10. On paper, everything seemed fine, but in reality, our marriage has been anything but. I have reached my breaking point, and I need to know if I am the one in the wrong here. From the beginning, my mother-in-law has been a nightmare. She made everything about her from day one. At our wedding, she wore white, claiming it was a family tradition. It wasn't. She constantly criticizes me, from my cooking to my appearance. I will never forget the time she called me fat at a family gathering, right in front of everyone. And what did my husband do? Nothing. Not a single word to defend me. It did not stop there. She has accidentally destroyed my belongings, including my grandmother's necklace, which she threw out because it looked like cheap costume jewelry. She has gone out of her way to make me feel small and unwelcome in my own home. But every time I tried to talk to my husband about it, he would brush it off, saying I was overreacting or being too emotional. And then there is my husband. He is always on Reddit, constantly giving strangers relationship advice, which is laughable considering how he treats me. He spends more time rating women's breasts on Reddit than talking to me. Literally. And just so you know, the last pair he rated weren't a 4 out of 10. They were a 10 out of 10. Yeah, he has plenty of time to do that, but cannot be bothered to remember anything about my life. He will forget my birthday, our anniversary, even simple things like what I'm working on or what is important to me, but he has a perfect memory for his work schedule and things that matter to him. When we fight, he becomes incredibly hostile and always throws in a sarcastic buddy at the end of his sentences, like I am some acquaintance he can barely tolerate. And he never cleans. The house, the dishes, laundry, you name it, it is all on me. It is like he thinks being an adult is optional as long as he has his job and his Reddit account. The final straw came a few weeks ago. I am 5 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter. My mother-in-law started making comments about how she will have to whip the girl into shape and how she will raise her to be tough because I am too soft. When I told my husband that I did not want his mother to have too much influence on our daughter, especially with the way she treats me, he just laughed it off, saying his mother means well and that I was overthinking it. But the moment that truly broke me was when we were talking about future childcare, and my husband suggested that his mother should watch our daughter while we work. I told him I was not comfortable with that, especially considering how his mother treats me, and he snapped. He called me paranoid and said I should get over it, because his mother was going to be a big part of our daughter's life, whether I liked it or not. This is the same woman who believes corporal punishment is okay. I have seen her hit my husband's nephew for the smallest things, and no one does anything about it. It is like they are all living in some kind of cult, and I am finally waking up to the reality of what is going on. If he would not stand up for me, how could I expect him to stand up for our child? I started to fear for what kind of environment our daughter would grow up in, a place where she might be belittled or bullied by her own grandmother, with a father who would not do anything to stop it. Oh, and did I mention that he missed our first ultrasound? His mother needed him to help her with something urgent. It turned out to be fixing her Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi? He chose that over seeing our daughter for the first time. That told me everything I needed to know about where I stand in his life. So I packed up and left. I'm done living like this. Oh, and in case you are wondering, I have already contacted a lawyer. You cannot scare me into complying anymore because I have all those texts. You know exactly which ones I am talking about. So, Stefan, I wish you all the best in your future marriage, with your mother and the women of Reddit whose breasts you do not even deserve. Am I the asshole for leaving my husband after he neglected me for years, let his mother mistreat me, and made me fear for our future daughter's safety? Tiny update. Stefan has seen this post. He is mad that apparently one of you found him based on the rate my breasts thing. He has deleted his account. For any purposes, I want to clarify that I left out any actual incriminating information that could lead to doxing him. Any and all people who are pretending to know me or have any incriminating information about me are lying. I am not from South Carolina, I am not moving in with any other guy, and I am also not sleeping around.